Imagine waking up tomorrow and nothing could shake you. Not the criticism, not the failure, not the loss, not the chaos that seems to find you no matter how carefully you've arranged your life. Not because your life is suddenly perfect, not because you've gone cold and stopped caring, but because somewhere deep inside you, you have built something the world simply cannot touch. The Stoics had a word for it: apatheia. Not apathy the way we use it today, not indifference, not numbness, but a profound inner stillness. A freedom from being thrown around by every wave of circumstance. A state where you can feel everything and still remain standing. And here's what makes this remarkable. The people who mastered this weren't monks hiding from the world in some mountain monastery. They were emperors managing empires on the verge of collapse. They were generals staring down defeat. They were slaves who had lost every external freedom imaginable and yet somehow remained free where it counted most, inside. Today we're going to talk about how they did it. We're going to go deep into the philosophy, the practices, and the psychology behind what I'm calling the unshakable mind. And I'm not going to leave you with just theory. By the end of this, you'll have a real framework, something you can actually use in the argument with someone you love, in the career setback that keeps you awake at night, in the quiet dread that creeps in at 2 a.m. when the world is asleep and your mind isn't. This is Stoicism, not the watered-down bumper sticker version. The real thing, and if you let it in, it will change how you move through the world. Most people think they know what Stoicism is. Most people think it means suppressing your emotions, walking around stone-faced, pretending nothing gets to you. That's not it. That's never been it. The Stoics were deeply emotional people. Seneca wept. Marcus Aurelius grieved. Epictetus, who had been a slave, who had his leg broken by a cruel master, wrote with more passion and fire than most people who have never suffered a day in their lives. The Stoics weren't against feeling. They were against being controlled by feeling. There's a difference, and it's everything. Stoicism was born in Athens around 300 BC, and it started with a wreck. A merchant named Zeno of Citium was sailing with a valuable cargo when his ship went down. He lost everything in an afternoon. He washed up in Athens with nothing, wandered into a bookshop, and stumbled onto the writings of Socrates. Something in those words cracked him open. He asked the bookseller where he could find a man who thought like this. The bookseller pointed to a philosopher walking past outside. Zeno followed him. From total loss, a philosophy was born. And that origin matters, because Stoicism was never designed for comfortable people in comfortable circumstances. It was forged in disaster. It was built for the moments when the ship goes down and you're left standing on a foreign shore with nothing but your own mind. The Stoics arrived at one central, radical conviction. The quality of your life is determined not by what happens to you, but by how you respond to what happens to you. That sounds almost too simple. It isn't. Most of us live as if the complete opposite were true. We believe, really believe deep down, that if we could just fix our circumstances, we'd finally be okay. Get the promotion, find the relationship, move somewhere new, hit the number in the bank account, and then the anxiety will lift and the peace will arrive. The Stoics would say that's the trap. Not because ambition is wrong, not because wanting things is shameful, but because you're handing the keys to your own happiness to forces that can be taken from you at any moment. You are building your inner life on sand, and the tide always comes. So they offered a different foundation. It starts with what they called the dichotomy of control. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who spent his private evenings writing a philosophical journal that was never meant to be published, the book we now call Meditations, put it plainly. He wrote that we have power over our minds and not over outside events, and that realizing this is where strength begins. Everything in your life, every single thing, falls into one of two categories: things within your control, your thoughts, your values, your effort, your attention, your response, your character, and things outside your control, other people's opinions, the economy, the weather, your past, your body's health, whether they call back, whether the plan works, whether you're recognized for what you've done. The Stoics did not say the second category is unimportant. They didn't tell you to stop caring about outcomes or relationships or your health. They said it is a catastrophic mistake to depend on those things for your sense of well-being, because everything in that second category can be taken. And if your peace lives there, it goes with it. Build on what cannot be taken. Build on yourself. That's the foundation everything else rests on. Now, Stoicism isn't just a set of ideas you nod at and then forget by Tuesday. It's a practice. It's a daily discipline. And the Stoics trained themselves across 3 core areas, not rigid boxes, but different angles of attack on the same project. Becoming someone who cannot be broken by the world. The first area is desire. What you want and what you fear. The Stoics made a distinction between what they called preferred indifference and true goods. Money, health, status, comfort. These are preferred indifference. It makes perfect sense to pursue them. It's reasonable to want them. But they are not necessary conditions for a good life. And if you need them in order to feel okay, you have made yourself a hostage to fortune. The only things that are good without exception, in every circumstance, at every moment, are virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, self-discipline. These are goods that cannot be stripped from you by circumstance. A tyrant can take your wealth, your freedom, your health. He cannot take your commitment to telling the truth. He cannot take your courage. He cannot make you betray your values without your cooperation. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic writers and also one of the wealthiest men in Rome, understood this tension personally. He lived in extraordinary luxury, vast estates, political influence, hundreds of servants. And yet he wrote about wealth, with a lightness that most wealthy people never find. He knew it could vanish. He held it the way you might hold a glass of water while walking. Carefully, but knowing that if you drop it, you are never the water. And he was right to hold it that way. The Emperor Nero eventually turned on him and ordered him to end his own life. Seneca did it without panic, without rage, with a kind of terrible composure that his executioners reportedly found more unsettling than grief would have been. He had never confused his wealth for his worth. When the wealth was taken, the worth remained. The practice here is to regularly honestly ask yourself, what am I afraid to lose? What would I do if I lost it? Is there a version of the good life, not a compromised version, but a genuine version? That doesn't depend on that thing staying. If your answer is no, that thing owns you, and the work is to loosen its grip. The second area is action. How you move through the world and what you do with what you cannot control. The Stoics believed in what they called reserved action. You act with complete commitment. You give everything, but you carry a mental asterisk at all times. You do your best, and you accept that the outcome is not entirely yours to determine. There's a metaphor they loved. The archer. She spends years in training. She perfects her stance, her breathing, the way she holds the string, the angle of her body. She draws back and releases, and at the exact moment the arrow leaves her fingers, the wind shifts. The arrow misses. Does she curse the wind? Does she unravel? Does she declare herself a failure? No, because her responsibility was to aim well and release well. The wind is not her department. This is how the Stoics approached everything. Business, relationships, creative work, leadership, war. Pour yourself into the effort. Control what you can control. Release the outcome with genuine acceptance, not forced pretend acceptance, but the real kind that comes from understanding that you were never in charge of the wind. Marcus Aurelius governed Rome for nearly 20 years during one of its most brutal periods. Wars on multiple fronts, a devastating plague that killed millions, political conspiracies at every turn. And his private journal, again, never meant to be seen, is not a chronicle of victories. It's a record of a man who kept asking himself, every single day, am I meeting this well? Not, am I winning? Not, is everything going according to plan? But am I meeting this well? He wrote in one of the most quietly powerful lines in all of Western philosophy. Do what nature requires, set out immediately if possible, and don't look around to see if people will know about it. Don't wait for Plato's ideal state. Be satisfied with even the smallest progress, and consider that result to be no small thing. Just start. Act now. Do the next right thing. Don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect circumstances that may never come. Before any important effort in your life, try writing 2 things. What you will bring to this, your focus, your care, your discipline, your full presence, and what you will release, the outcome, the timeline, how other people respond. Let the first list be long, let the second list go. The third area is the most radical of all, and it goes right to the heart of what makes the Stoic mind unshakable. It's about perception, about the stories you tell yourself, about what's happening to you. Epictetus was born a slave in the Roman Empire. He was owned by a secretary of Nero, a man known for his cruelty. There is a story, possibly true, possibly legend, but true in spirit, that his master once grabbed his leg and began twisting it as a demonstration of power. Epictetus calmly said, "If you continue that, you will break it." The master continued, The leg broke. Epictetus said, "Did I not tell you it would break?" Now you can read that story as a man in denial, as someone suppressing unbearable pain. The Stoics would say you're misreading it entirely. What Epictetus had achieved, and what he spent the rest of his life teaching, after he was eventually freed, and became one of the most celebrated philosophers in the ancient world, was the ability to separate the event from his interpretation of the event. The leg broke, that is a fact. That it destroyed him. That it proved his life was hopeless. That it confirmed his powerlessness. That was a story. And he refused to tell it. Marcus Aurelius wrote something almost shocking in its simplicity. He wrote that we have the power to strip away many superfluous troubles which exist entirely in the imagination. Not all troubles, not the real ones, but many, the ones that exist not in reality, but in the narrative we've constructed around reality. Think about how much of your suffering in the last year has been the event itself, and how much has been the story you told about the event. The story that this means you're failing, that this proves something bad about you, that this is how it will always be, that things will never improve. The event is real. The story is optional. The practice is this. When you feel a strong negative emotion, anger, anxiety, shame, resentment, pause. Ask, what is the bare fact here, stripped of all interpretation? And then ask, what story am I wrapping around that fact? Is that story true? Is it serving me? Is it the only possible story? You will not always find a better story immediately. Sometimes the facts are genuinely terrible. But even then, the Stoics would say, the question is never only what happened. The question is always also, who are you going to be about what happened? Beyond these core disciplines, the Stoics practiced specific mental exercises, techniques for training the mind. The way an athlete trains the body. These aren't metaphors. They're actual practices that ancient Stoics used daily, and that modern psychology has independently arrived at as genuinely effective tools for resilience. The first is what the Stoics called premeditatio, malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every morning, or in any quiet moment, you deliberately imagine losing the things you love, your health, your home, your relationships, your ability to do the work you care about. You sit with those images, clearly and calmly. This sounds dark. It isn't. Or rather, it's the kind of darkness that leads to light. We move through our lives treating the people we love as permanent. We treat our health as a given. We treat today as one of thousands of identical days with no particular weight to it. And then something is taken, suddenly, without warning. The way things always are taken. And we're devastated. Not just by the loss, but by the fact that we never truly saw what we had while we had it. Negative visualization shatters that sleepwalking. When you genuinely imagine losing something, even for a few minutes, you start to actually see it. The coffee in the morning, the sound of someone's laugh, the fact that your body moved through the world today without pain. These things become visible again. You stop taking them for granted. You start living in them instead of past them. Seneca wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us allow ourselves to be seized by whatever delights are available while we can. Try it tonight, 2 minutes before you sleep. If today had been the last one, did you live it? Did you notice it? Was it worth having?" The second exercise is what Marcus Aurelius called the view from above. He regularly asked himself to zoom out, to imagine the full scale of history, the vast sweep of time, his own small life set within it. He wrote about how many great men had come before him, philosophers, generals, emperors, and how completely time had swallowed them. Every catastrophe that felt world-ending to someone dissolved. Every empire built over centuries, dust. This is not nihilism. The Stoics were not saying nothing matters. They were saying, the thing you're currently treating as the end of the world, is it really? In 100 years, in 1,000, will this moment have any weight at all? If not, and for most of our daily suffering, the answer is no. Then you are suffering in advance, and unnecessarily, for something that history will not even notice. When a problem feels enormous, place it in time. Ask, does this matter in 10 years? In 50? If the answer is no, you have permission to meet it with proportion rather than catastrophe. The third exercise is the evening review. Every night, Seneca sat with his day. He asked 3 questions. What did I do wrong today? What did I do right? What can I do better tomorrow? Then he slept. This is not self-punishment. This is the practice of seeing yourself clearly. Most of us avoid this kind of honest reflection because it's uncomfortable. Because the gap between who we want to be and who we actually were today can be painful to look at. So we scroll the phone and let the day dissolve without examining it. And then we wonder why we keep making the same mistakes. having the same reactions, falling into the same patterns year after year. Reflection is how character is built, not through grand decisions made in moments of inspiration, but through the quiet, daily, unglamorous work of looking at yourself honestly and asking, where was the gap today, and how do I close it? 5 minutes. 3 questions. Let it be uncomfortable. That discomfort is the feeling of growth. The 4th exercise is simpler than it sounds. Act as if someone whose judgment you deeply respect is watching. Epictetus suggested imagining your wisest mentor present in every moment, not to perform for them, not to seek their approval, but to use that imagined presence to elevate the quality of your choices. When you're about to snap at someone, about to take the easy, dishonest way out, about to give less than your best, would you do it in front of that person? Marcus Aurelius kept a mental list of people he admired, and in his journal he writes about what each of them taught him. From one, patience. From another, the willingness to listen. From another, the refusal to make excuses. He was building himself from the best materials available. The unshakable mind is not born. It's assembled slowly from 1,000 small choices. You don't build it in a moment of crisis. You build it on a Tuesday when nothing significant is happening and you choose, quietly, to be the person you've decided to be. Now let me be honest with you about something, because Stoicism deserves honesty. Reading about this philosophy is one thing. Nodding along to a video about it is one thing. The real test, the only test that matters, is whether it holds in the moments when life actually breaks open. When you lose something you love, the Stoics don't tell you not to grieve. They never said that. They said grief is real and human and right. What they said is that suffering should have a limit, not because feeling is weakness, but because there is a point where grief stops being love expressed and becomes self-destruction chosen. When Epictetus was asked how a Stoic should face the death of someone dear, he didn't say feel nothing. He said, do not add to the experience of loss the thought that you have been ruined. The loss is real. Whether it ends you, that part is still yours. When you're treated unjustly, and you will be. Everyone is. The Stoic response is not passive acceptance. The Stoics were not passive people. Marcus Aurelius fought wars. Cato stood against Julius Caesar. These were not men who sat quietly while the world did as it liked. The Stoic response to injustice is, take every action available to you clearly and persistently, without poisoning yourself with rage in the process. Because Marcus Aurelius understood something that most of us have to learn the hard way. He wrote that our anger and our grief do us more damage than the things that cause them. You can fight for what's right. You will fight better when you're not on fire inside. When you fail, and this might be the most important one, the Stoics believed failure was not the opposite of a good life. It was a component of one. Zeno built an entire philosophy after being destroyed by the sea. Epictetus built his from the floor of slavery. Marcus Aurelius inherited an empire mid-collapse and chose to write about inner virtue rather than outer triumph. The Stoic response to failure is not, it doesn't matter. It is, what is here to be learned? What virtue is absent? Where do I go from this? Not with shame spiraling into paralysis. Not with false cheerfulness that pretends the fall didn't happen. With the same clear-eyed, compassionate attention you'd offer a person you love who had stumbled. You are not your failure. Your failure is something that happened. You are the person deciding what happens next. Let me give you a structure. A daily practice that takes less than 15 minutes but compounds, over time, into something that changes the texture of your entire life. In the morning, before your phone, before anyone needs anything from you, sit for 5 minutes. Ask yourself, what challenges might today bring? Where will I be tempted to react instead of respond? Where will I need patience, courage, honesty? Then remind yourself of the one thing you can always control. Not what happens, but how you meet it. Throughout the day, build in the pause. Anytime you feel a strong emotional reaction rising, anger, anxiety, shame, resentment, don't act immediately. Breathe once. Ask, is this within my control? What is the actual fact here, separate from my story about it? What would the best version of me do right now? You won't always choose well, but the pause alone transforms the quality of your days. In the evening, 5 minutes. 3 questions. Where did I act according to my values today? Where did I fall short? What's one thing I'll do differently tomorrow? Then close it. Don't drag it into sleep. Tomorrow is another chance. Tomorrow always is until it isn't. That's the whole practice. It looks modest written out like that. But practice daily over months and years, it rewires something fundamental. You stop being a leaf thrown by every wind. You start to become the kind of person who can stand in the storm. There's a reason This philosophy matters more now than it may have at any point in centuries. We live inside systems specifically engineered to destabilize us. Every platform on your phone has been designed by brilliant people who understand psychology deeply to trigger your emotions. Outrage, envy, desire, fear. Emotional people are engaged people. Engaged people generate revenue. Your inner life is the product being sold. We have more information, more noise, more stimulation, more competing demands on our attention than any human beings who have ever lived. And most of us have received zero training in how to navigate any of it. We've inherited the most distracting environment in human history, with absolutely no tools for staying centered within it. The Stoics had no smartphones, but they understood the human mind, its hungers, its fears, its extraordinary capacity for both suffering and resilience. Better than most of what passes for wisdom today, they knew we would always want more than we have, that we would always fear loss, that we'd be forever vulnerable to flattery and wounded by criticism. And they built a system, not to erase these tendencies, which are simply human, but to ensure that we are the ones driving, not being driven. Marcus Aurelius sat at the center of the known world, wielding more power than almost any person who had ever lived, surrounded by flatterers and enemies and people who needed things from him constantly. And every morning he reminded himself in his private journal, "You are just a man, you will die." The whole of human history is a blink. Today, try to be good. If he needed that practice, he, of all people. What does that say about the rest of us? The Stoics were not perfect. Seneca wrote beautifully about the unimportance of wealth while accumulating enormous amounts of it, and he was honest enough to acknowledge the contradiction. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the equality of all human beings, while living in a society built on slavery, and his journals show a man who wrestled with that gap. They were not monuments. They were people, trying, falling short, trying again. And that's part of the teaching, too. Stoicism is not a destination. It's a direction. It's the ongoing, never finished, deeply human project of trying to close the distance between who you are and who you're capable of being. You don't finish it. You practice it every day in the small moments that no one else sees. The moment you choose to pause instead of snap, to release instead of cling, to keep going instead of collapse. Epictetus, who began as property and ended as one of the most influential thinkers in Western history, said it in the simplest possible terms. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. That's it. That's the whole philosophy, compressed to a single sentence. You cannot control the storm, but you can become someone who doesn't need the storm to stop in order to move forward. You can become someone who meets what comes, all of it. The beauty and the devastation and the ordinary. Tuesdays in between on with steadiness, with dignity, with an inner life that belongs to you and cannot be taken. That is the unshakable mind. Build it. Start today. Be patient with yourself along the way. It's waiting for you. If this message resonated with you, don't just scroll past it. Carry it with you. Hit like so this mindset reaches more people who need it.
And subscribe to the channel,
because the next lesson might be the one that changes how you see everything. Stay disciplined. Stay calm. Stay in control.